So welcome to the online cafe kōrero for March. If you'd like to turn your screens off and your microphones off during this part of the meeting because we're recording it, and then later on, if you'd like, we'll stop the recording and we can chat in person a little bit more. But just as a note, we are recording at the moment. My name's Nicky Mayne. I'm the General Manager of Community Services for the Stroke Foundation, or we are now known as Stroke Aotearoa New Zealand, and that's a whole other topic we can talk about later if anyone did want to talk about the change of name, etc. So this topic is called Understanding Stroke, and it might be a little bit strange to have this type of topic when people come to this kōrero because you have already experienced a stroke, you're already affected by stroke. But as we've worked around the country, we've found that many people actually don't know some of the very basic information relating to stroke. So hoping that this can fill a little bit of information gaps that you might have, but also hopefully it could assist you to understand why you experience some of the impacts of stroke you have. And we'll also take a quick look at the risk around having another stroke and how you can reduce that risk. So if we move on to the next slide. First question is, what is a stroke? So if you can click again, please, Imogen. So a stroke is a sudden loss of brain function caused by an interruption of blood flow to the brain. And there's two main types of stroke. There is the hemorrhagic stroke, which if you click another time, Imogen, will come up, which is essentially a burst blood vessel. And the other far more common type is a ischemic stroke. So ischemic strokes are most common, about 86% of strokes are ischemic. So a hemorrhagic stroke occurs when an artery in the brain bursts. Ischemic stroke occurs when there's a blockage, usually a blood clot, restricts or cuts off blood flow to brain tissue. So blood flow brings oxygen to brain cells so that they work properly, and without the oxygen, the affected part of the brain is damaged. If blood flow is not restored quickly, this damage cannot be repaired. So really important message with stroke is to restore blood flow as quickly as possible. So the other term that you might have heard is around a TIA. So a TIA is a transient ischemic attack, and it as you can see from the word in there, it's an ischemic stroke, but, well, it would have been ischemic stroke, so it's the same as an ischemic stroke, but the blockage clears itself. It doesn't stick around. But because TIAs, or transient ischemic attacks, are often called mini strokes or warning strokes, it's really still important to get urgent treatment with a TIA. So if you can just click another couple of times, please, Imogen. A TIA only lasts for a short amount of time, no longer than 24 hours to be a true TIA, and shows no damage on brain in imaging. I apologise, my words are falling over today a little bit. If untreated, 18% of people with a TIA will have a full-blown stroke within 3 months, 12% within 7 days, 8% within 48 hours. So really important that people don't ignore the symptoms of a TIA, that they don't just sit down and have a cup of tea or go and have a rest. A TIA still requires urgent treatment because that person is at very high risk of having a full-blown stroke, in the next few hours or the next few months. Now, we talked a little bit about how urgent it was to restore blood flow as soon as possible. So on the next slide, I'm sure you've all heard about FAST. So the message we get out to everyone is that at any sign of stroke, call 111 immediately. Now, the FAST stands for, face is drooping on one side, that there is an arm weakness on one side, that the speech might be mixed up, slurred, or lost. And the T is about taking action and calling 111. There are some other signs of stroke, but it's really important that we just share the fast message because that captures most strokes, and it's easier to remember for people to identify. The research says that if we were to share more of the signs of stroke, it doesn't affect more strokes being noted early. So it's important, if you've had a stroke, to make sure your friends and family, people that you're around, actually do know the signs of stroke. Not only could it help, if anything else happen to you, but also it could identify stroke symptoms in another person. Calling 111 and telling them you suspect it is a stroke is the best way to get medical attention quickly, rather than just getting someone to take you into the hospital. It means that an ambulance will be sent to help. First responders can assess the situation and also prime the hospital to prepare for your arrival. This makes sure there is no waiting time and treatment can begin quickly. Remember, the sooner medical treatment begins, the lower the risk that permanent brain damage occurs, and there is a better chance of an excellent recovery. In some cases, it means that the damage can be completely reversed. Our technology, our medical interventions have come so far, and there are ways to absolutely reverse the damage that can be caused by a stroke, as long as a person presents to a hospital in a really quick period of time, and the type of stroke they have is responsive to those types of treatments. So the fast message, sharing that far and wide, is really the best line of defense about having such damaging impact from stroke on people. Another thing to be thinking about in terms of stroke is that everybody's stroke is different. Just because you've had a stroke, it doesn't mean that your stroke looks like someone else who's had a stroke. So that's because it depends on where in the brain the stroke has occurred and also how much damage has been done. Some stroke effects are very obvious, like balance and movement. Some are more hidden, like thinking and feeling. So often people have an image of in their minds of what a stroke survivor looks like, but some of the effects of stroke is very, very hidden. Now, while I've said that everybody's stroke is different, on the next slide, there are also some ways that every stroke is often the same. So there are some very common side effects of stroke that people can share. Some of these things are neurofatigue. So fatigue is something everybody experiences, but neurofatigue is very, very different, as I'm sure some of you in here have experienced. Short-term memory loss, emotional changes, anxiety and depression. These are very common experiences from people who have had a stroke. Up to 70% of stroke survivors experience low mood after stroke, and more than 25% show significant post-stroke depression. So as we're going around the country and we're talking to medical professionals, people who work in primary and community care in particular, we talk about this to make sure they ask a stroke survivor not just about the physical impacts of their stroke, but also about some of these emotional changes that people might be experiencing. The key message in all of this is to seek support if you're concerned about any of these or other effect of stroke. If you have an impact from stroke that you feel you're concerned about, please check in with your GP or other health professional to see if there's anything going on that could be supported by them. Now, the next slide is about stroke prevention, and this might seem like a little bit of a strange one because you've all had a stroke and you can't actually prevent a stroke, your initial stroke from happening if you have had one. But we still need to talk about stroke prevention because if you have had a stroke, you are actually at higher risk of having another stroke. That's the bad news. Around 25% of strokes are said to be recurrent. So 25% of strokes are either second or additional strokes. But the good news is that up to 90% of strokes are preventable. So it's not inevitable that people who have experienced a stroke will have another one. And people can take ownership of their and responsibility to actually reduce their stroke risk so they don't end up being one of those 25% who have another stroke. On the next slide, here are some of the ways that you can actually make changes to reduce your stroke risk. So the more risk factors you have, for example, if you have high blood pressure, unmanaged atrial fibrillation, you're a smoker, you have diabetes, etc., the higher your risk of stroke. But if you are checking your blood pressure regularly and you have that under control, if you are, you keep your intake of alcohol low, if you take your prescribed medication, if you have high blood pressure or if you have atrial fibrillation, which is sorry, the word's just gone out of my mind, a irregular heartbeat, then if you're doing those things to manage the situation, if you've checked for that or your medical professionals checked for that, and it's being managed, if you have it, you're taking your medication, you're checking your cholesterol levels regularly and having them under control, then you are reducing your risk of stroke. I mean, this is a message for everyone to reduce their risk of stroke. It doesn't mean it's not just for those who have already had a stroke. These are the key messages for everyone to be able to reduce their risk of stroke.